Tell me, what do you think about a 13-year-old boy who becomes a father?
They look like brother and sister. They are in fact father and daughter.
And I see this thing for a 13-year-old father. This guy is barely 4 feet tall. He's 13, but he looks like he's like 6 or 7.
Fucked up his life and his GCSEs, cause he's 13 years old.
Young Alfie's life was turned upside down when he found out his 14-year-old girlfriend was pregnant. They are both from the UK's and made headlines because Alfie was allegedly a 13-year-old father. He was immediately thrown into the father role and into the spotlight. The media followed his family and every turn in this story. But Alfie's world came to a halt when he found out his girlfriend Chantel wasn't the mother of his baby because the baby was never his in the first place. So let's get into it. Alfie met Chantel in the year 2008. He was 12 years old and she was just 13. They met while playing out in the streets in the city. And at first, Alfie's mother thought that their friendship was innocent and she actually allowed them to spend alone time because she says that he hadn't gone through puberty yet. At some point, Chantel's family moved away, but Alfie and Chantel were good friends, so he was able to go and visit her and stay overnight at her home. Chantel was 14 when she allegedly became pregnant by Alfie, who was only 13. He was barely 4 foot tall and he looked about 8 years old. And neighbors had a lot to say about Chantel's parents and how she raised these kids because they claimed that the children ran wild in the street. They claimed that the parents are irresponsible and there were at least 3 other boys who had been allowed to stay with Chantel. So I guess she had a lot of sleepovers with a lot of different boys and the parents just were neglectful. There's also someone who came forward and said Chantel's father tried to kidnap one of their sons and the police were after him at some point. So it sounds like the parents are a little bit unhinged. And ultimately that's who to blame here. It's the parents because Alfie's a child, Chantel's a child. Why are these adults allowing their children to get in these predicaments? Chantel discovered that she was having a baby after 12 weeks. It also turns out that Chantel was hiding the fact that she was pregnant from her mother because, ultimately she's a child, so of course she's scared. Chantel tried keeping the pregnancy from her mother by wearing baggy t-shirts, but she was confronted when she was about 18 weeks pregnant because she started putting on some weight. At first, Chantel's mother was not happy about this because they already have 5 children, so another baby, that's a big responsibility. But it seems like Alfie's parents were advocating for him to be a dad because his father was quoted saying he could have shrugged his shoulders and sat at home on his PlayStation, but he had been at the hospital every day once the baby was born. It actually turns out that Alfie's father has 9 children of his own, so it seems like these people are very fertile. The dad has all of these children and now his 13-year-old son is supposedly having a baby, but nobody really knew about this story, which ended up blowing up until she actually had the child and people were like, wait, this is the father? She gave birth at the age of 15 in 2009 and British people were really up in their business. Articles quoted Alfie as the youngest father in the UK, even though he wasn't actually technically the youngest. I've done my research, but he made a bunch of press.
Weighing 7 pounds 3 ounces, Maisie Roxanne was born here at Eastbourne District General Hospital on Monday night after a 5-hour labour. Until then, Chantel had been attending the Cavendish School nearby, where fellow pupils say outside school, young teenage sex is nothing out of the ordinary.
So their baby was born and Alfie was thrown into the role of being a father. He said it was a crazy time. Holding his child for the first time was amazing. I was too young to understand the consequences of being a dad, but I liked holding her and immediately loved her. When the baby was born, this was a media circus, and it must have been a slow news week because there were paparazzis following this family when they were coming home with their groceries, waiting for them.
At Chantel's family home, provisions for the newest member arrived by the bagful. Which bag's got the nappies in?
We've got loads of nappies.
It's so bizarre to see those paparazzi waiting to get a picture of this family, but this story even went to the government. Like, people in parliament were speaking about it because they took this story and attached it to children who were young having children, like teenage pregnancies, and they were speaking about Alfie and Chantel publicly.
Even the Prime Minister and leader of the opposition found the topic of the day was school children becoming parents.
I don't know the individual details of the case, but of course, I think all of us would want to avoid teenage pregnancies.
Well, when I saw the pictures this morning, I mean, it is really worrying that in our country today you've got children having children.
And of course, this does capture your attention because it's an uncomfortable photo. It's a kid who's way too young having another kid.
They look like brother and sister. They are, in fact, father and daughter. Alfie Patten, at the tender age of 13, is a dad.
So like the government officials were worried about, people are concerned whether this Alfie kid can support a family, let alone a child. And of course, the press was all over this. And I can't really find a good quality video of this interview, but listen to this reporter ask Alfie if he will be a good dad.
Alfie, do you think you're going to be a good dad? Yeah. What do you have to do to be a good dad? Look after him, train.
The reporter even asked Alfie, how are you going to financially support this child? And his response was, what is financially?
What will you do financially?
What's financially?
What will you do for money? You've got lots of support from your family.
Yeah.
You guys must admit it's a little uncomfy to see the father and the mother because the mother is a lot more developed than the father. So it's kind of like, that's like, I don't know. It's like, I don't know. I don't even want to really comment on it. But the reporter did ask him, do you think you're too young to be a father? And he acknowledges, yes, I am.
You think that you're too young to have a baby?
But because this was a huge story, Alfie's life was completely changed. He was quoted saying, the amount of attention I got was crazy. Everywhere I went, people knew who I was. I couldn't leave the house for weeks. I had to have time off school. This is a lot of pressure on these two teenagers, and it seems like Alfie got the majority of the attention. I'm not entirely sure, but when it came to coverage, it just seemed that way. Max Clifford is actually the man who was the reporter on this case, and he was reporting through the Sun. He's the reason why they had that interview, and he was following this story. And there was a big change in events because at some point they, I guess, started talking a little bit more about the circumstances surrounding the relationship between these children, and they found out that Chantel had a few different partners.
I felt, I suppose, a bit sorry for them. They've ordered a DNA test, and the results of that, if they have, should be known by the end of next week. From my perspective, my only involvement is Alfie and his mum and dad. If Alfie is no longer involved, then the story will very quickly come to an end.
Max made an assumption that this story would die off if Alfie ended up not being the father, but that really was completely the opposite. And it's actually really unfortunate what he ended up going through. 6 men ended up coming forward. Well, 6 men, 6 children, young lads came forward saying that they slept with Chantel around the same time that she would have gotten pregnant. And one football player named Tyler Barker, who was 15 at the time, claimed that he had unprotected you-know-what with this girl. Eventually, Alfie and Tyler's parents agreed that both boys should take a 300-pound DNA test, which is pretty expensive. And it turns out that Tyler was, in fact, the father. I feel like Maury right now. Tyler is the father. This was actually heartbreaking for Alfie because he's a young boy and he kind of like accepted this identity of being this young father, and he was known for it. He got attention for it, and he was devastated. He cried for days, and he was extremely upset that Chantel and her family moved away and he could not see the baby anymore. So Alfie was going through it, and honestly, I do feel like this Max Clifford guy is a little bit sketchy because I feel like he saw this story, he grabbed it, he ran with it, and they didn't really do their due diligence because, like, why does he feel so confident in this interview before the DNA test came out that, oh, like, he's not the father? Why didn't they figure this out from the beginning?
Do you think the family will eventually come through, the media will just eventually leave them alone?
Well, yeah, I mean, it very much depends, I think, on what happens over the next few weeks, which we're not allowed to talk about, and the results of the DNA test. I think if little Alfie turns out not to be the father, which is, you know, probably what my instinct is at this moment in time, but we're not allowed to talk about it.
You think he's not the father?
Yeah, I think the odds against it are considerable. Is it possible? Yes. Does he believe he is? Yes. But my money would be that he isn't.
And like Max was saying earlier, he felt like this story was going to die off, but it really didn't. You guys saw in the beginning of this video, there were some clips of people talking about this on the internet. There are so many people who have made videos and trolled Alfie all over this. And a lot of people believe that he still was the father. I was talking to some people and they're like, oh yeah, like the young father. Well, did you know that he actually ended up not being the dad, which never really got through to people. But I found like a song about Alfie that someone wrote, and I just have to include it because I want to show you how much of an impact this had and how much content is out there really grilling this kid.
Songs about being a 13-year-old father. He's 13 years old and he's got a son. This wouldn't have happened if he jizzed up a bum. The father's a child and the mum's a sleaze. He's fucked up his life and his GCSEs because he's 13 years old. The police had to get involved. Now he's a father and he's all alone. I don't know how he even got a boner.
It's a little disheartening to see how people talked about Alfie back then, because people were way more savage back when this story went on, and, you know, online bullying and everything like that. So he really went through it. And I think that damaged him in the long run, because he accepted this daughter, this fate, it was taken away from him. He built an identity around it. And if you look him up online, he's known as the youngest father in UK, which isn't true. But anyways, nowadays I saw him in the news again, which prompted me to make this video. And actually, I did think he was the father. So going into it, I was like, wait, what the hell? He's not the dad? I did try to find where the mother is nowadays, but I have no idea. But I do know where Alfie is because he's still like a celebrity over this. So he has been living with his mother, and they recently were kicked out of their home. He's 25 and she's 55, and they were kicked out over a drug dealing operation. It turns out the landlord actually tattled on them. I'm just kidding. The landlord snitched on them. I can't believe it. But anyways, they had a 3-bedroom house and they were using it to pretty much run a drug operation, and it was spilling out into the streets and affecting the neighborhood. So it looks like they were like the trap house. It turns out they've actually had 5 drug raids on the home in the past 2 years. So it's about time for them to be kicked out. And it turns out they're still under investigation at this point for the drugs. So it's really unfortunate to see that this is where his life went. I do feel like part of the direction of his life is maybe due to this story, but also due to his parents. And really, I do want to stress that the parents are the ones to blame here. And they really put these kids through it, not doing their due diligence and not paying attention to their child's needs, neglecting them and allowing them to be put in these uncomfortable circumstances. But I do want to correct the narrative that the youngest father in the UK is Sean Stewart. He actually had a kid at the age of 12. Which would have been the same age as Alfie, so I guess he would have been the youngest one. But the woman was, or the lady, the girl, oh my God, the teen, the child was 16 years old, and it was back in 1998. They, I don't know why this line is included, but they broke up 6 months later. So, oh, young love. Anyways, I want to hear what you guys think about this situation below. Here is my email. If you guys have any other video ideas for me, I'm getting really close to the mic. I'm going to be, sounds so bad when I get so close. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Send me an email. Send me video ideas, guys. Please, I'm asking, I'm begging, I'm crying, I'm pleading. And I'll see you guys in a new video soon. Bye, guys.